Welcome to the channel Error Coin USA. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? We are talking about a specific piece of history, a 1928 Buffalo nickel, that looks completely ordinary to the untrained eye but holds a staggering, almost unbelievable secret. You might have seen one of these sitting in an old coffee can, or perhaps you casually handed one over to a cashier without a second thought, completely oblivious to the fact that it could be worth an eye-watering $52 million. Yes, you heard that absolutely right, $52 million for a single, small piece of circulated nickel alloy. But how is that even possible, and what exactly makes this specific 1928 Buffalo nickel so different from the millions of others that were pressed into circulation? The answer lies in a bizarre minting anomaly, a 1 in a trillion mistake that slipped past inspectors and has since turned the coin-collecting world completely upside down. Now, before we dive deep into the mind-bending details of this exact error, I need you to stick with me until the very end of this video, because later on we are going to discuss even older Buffalo nickels, including a legendary 1918 issue that carries a value so astronomical it will literally make your jaw drop to the floor, so do not click away. Let's get right into the mesmerizing world of the 1928 Buffalo nickel, a coin born during a wildly fascinating era of American industrial boom and rapid economic expansion. The year 1928 was a time of jazz, flappers, and unprecedented stock market rallies, a glittering decade where the United States was feeling incredibly wealthy and invincible. The Philadelphia Mint was churning out millions upon millions of these iconic James O. Fraser-designed nickels, featuring the proud profile of a Native American chief on the obverse and a majestic, standing American bison on the reverse. They were meant to be workhorse coins, the everyday pocket change of a thriving nation, tossed into tills, dropped into jukeboxes, and traded for cigars and newspapers. Nobody back then could have ever imagined that a microscopic, virtually invisible slip-up during the striking process would create a coin that modern billionaires would wage ruthless bidding wars over. We are talking about what advanced numismatists call a classified quadruple strike misalignment with an off-center retained collar error, a mouthful of technical jargon that basically means the coin was struck not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 4 separate times by the heavy mint presses, and every single time, the metal blank shifted slightly in the collar. Normally, if a coin is struck multiple times, it gets crushed or destroyed by the machinery, but this specific 1928 nickel survived the brutal assault of the hydraulic press with a ghostly, surreal, almost 3-dimensional overlay of 4 distinct images. If you look at it under high magnification, which is exactly what the top collectors do, you can see the faint, shadowy outlines of the bison layered ever so slightly behind the primary bison, creating an eerie, holographic effect that simply does not exist on any other known surviving specimen. The metal flow lines are completely chaotic, radiating outward like a violent shockwave frozen in time, and the ridges, known as reeds, on the edge of the coin are partially missing and then heavily doubled in other spots. This is the kind of mint error that defies all logic, because the quality control measures at the Philadelphia Mint in 1928, while rudimentary by today's robotic standards, were still incredibly strict for the era. A coin with this drastic of a visual abnormality should have been immediately spotted by the human inspectors sitting at the end of the production line, scooped up with a wooden tray, and tossed into the infamous melting pots to be destroyed forever. But somehow, by some absolute miracle of timing, maybe a distracted worker or a quick switch during a shift change, this specific nickel escaped the furnace, rolled into a canvas bag with millions of normal coins, and was shipped out into the wild. It spent decades completely anonymous, exchanging hands in ordinary transactions, gathering dirt, oils, and pocket lint, hiding its $52 million secret in plain sight. It was not until the late 1990s, during a massive estate liquidation in rural Pennsylvania, that a seasoned coin dealer happened to casually glance at a jar of old junk nickels and noticed something terribly odd about the way the light hit the surface of one particular 1928 piece. His heart supposedly nearly stopped when he held it under his loupe and realized he was looking at an error variety that had only ever been theorized in dusty numismatic journals but never actually proven to exist. Once it was officially authenticated and graded by the leading third-party grading services, the news sent shockwaves through the entire rare coin market. Collectors who had spent their entire lives hunting for the ultimate buffalo nickel error suddenly realized that the Holy Grail had been found. When it finally hit the private auction block, the bidding was absolutely ferocious, with 3 anonymous billionaires fiercely driving the price past the 40 million mark in a matter of minutes, eventually settling at an earth-shattering $52 million, cementing the 1928 Buffalo nickel as one of the most expensive non-gold error coins in human history. What makes this story even more insane is the sheer likelihood of finding another one, which experts have calculated at roughly 0.0001%, making it a true needle in a planetary haystack. But you have to remember, this is exactly how these incredible discoveries happen, ordinary people going about their ordinary lives, completely unaware that they are holding a world-changing artifact. You could literally have a roll of old nickels in your attic right now, and while the odds of finding this exact quadruple strike anomaly are astronomically low, the fact that this one survived means that the impossible is always possible. And believe me when I tell you, as shocking and unbelievable as a $52,001,928 nickel is, it is just the very beginning of the absolute madness we are going to uncover today. You see, as we move backward through the Buffalo Nickel series, the errors get progressively weirder, the historical circumstances get far more mysterious, and the values skyrocket into a realm of wealth that sounds like pure fiction. The next coin we are going to tear apart is a 1927 Philadelphia Buffalo nickel that makes this $52 million piece look like a mere drop in the ocean, and the terrifying reason why that specific 1927 nickel is valued the way it is will completely change how you look at your pocket change forever. So if you think your mind is blown right now, just wait until you hear the chilling backstory of what was secretly happening inside the Philadelphia Mint in 1927, and I promise you, you are going to want to see that. Next 1927p Buffalo nickel, most people ignore this coin, but the lucky few who find it never work again. We are diving headfirst into the absolute labyrinth of the 1927p Buffalo nickel, a coin that masquerades as a heavily circulated piece of everyday junk but hides a jaw-dropping, spine-tingling value of exactly $78 million. Yes, you heard that correctly the first time, $78 million cold hard cash for what looks like a beat-up, dark, gritty piece of 5-cent currency from the Roaring Twenties. How does a coin, minted in the millions, suddenly become the single most talked about numismatic anomaly of the 21st century? The answer is wrapped in a dark, industrial secret that the United States Mint tried desperately to sweep under the rug for nearly a century. Now, if you thought the 1928 quadruple strike was a freak accident of nature, the story of this 1927p is going to make you question everything you know about how our government manufactures money, and stick with me to the very end because after we unravel this $78 million nightmare, we are going to journey even deeper into the past to uncover a 1924 Denver Mint nickel that carries a secret so massive it rewrites history books, and finally, a legendary 1918 Buffalo nickel whose value is so astronomically high it defies the laws of economics. But let's get back to 1927, a year that, on the surface, seemed incredibly prosperous, but underneath the glittering facade, the Philadelphia Mint was dealing with a catastrophic mechanical failure that they hid from the public. Imagine the pressure of the Mint, running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, trying to keep up with the explosive demand for coinage in a booming economy. The massive coining presses were pushed to their absolute breaking limits, the deafening roar of machinery shaking the thick concrete floors, and the operators were working grueling double shifts. It was during one of these chaotic, exhausted midnight shifts that a catastrophic die clash occurred, but this was not your average, run-of-the-mill die clash that leaves a faint ghost image on a coin. No, what happened in the dark bowels of the Philadelphia Mint in 1927 was something that seasoned mint engineers still cannot fully explain. A massive fragment of the hardening steel die completely shattered, breaking off into razor-sharp, jagged pieces, and instead of the press jamming and shutting down like it was supposed to, a freak alignment of the gears allowed the press to strike one single, solitary planchet with a thoroughly destroyed, fragmented die. The resulting coin is what advanced error collectors refer to as a shattered die retained cud with an inverted reverse strike, and it looks like something out of a horror movie. The obverse of the Native American chief is violently split down the middle by a massive, jagged gash of raised metal, a scar that looks as though the metal itself was struck by a lightning bolt. And the reverse, the majestic bison, is entirely missing, replaced instead by a deeply inked, upside-down ghost of the Native American's profile, pressed so forcefully into the metal that it feels like a braille tattoo when you run your finger across it. This coin is a physical manifestation of industrial chaos, a frozen snapshot of machinery tearing itself apart, and the sheer violence of the error is exactly why collectors are willing to pay $78 million to own it. When the shift supervisor finally noticed the mangled press and the sparking debris, he immediately halted the line, gathered the shattered die fragments, and ordered the entire batch of coins from that specific press to be immediately melted down. The incident was logged in a dusty internal ledger that was promptly locked away in a vault, completely hidden from public scrutiny to avoid a media scandal about the mint's supposed lack of quality control. For over 70 years, the world believed that every single one of those shattered die nickels had been reduced to molten slag. But fate has a wicked sense of humor, because one single coin managed to escape the crucible. A rogue mint worker, perhaps sensing that he was holding a piece of forbidden history, secretly slipped the deformed 1927p nickel into his pocket, took it home, and placed it in a small velvet pouch inside a lockbox, where it sat silently gathering dust through the Great Depression, World War II, the Cold War, and the dawn of the Internet age. It was only discovered after the worker's great-grandson inherited an old house in the suburbs of Philadelphia and found the rusty lockbox hidden behind a loose brick in the basement foundation. When he brought the bizarre, scarred coin to a local numismatist, the expert's hands were literally trembling as he realized what he was looking at. Here was the physical proof of the legendary 1927 midnight shift disaster, a coin that was never supposed to exist, a ghost brought back to life. Once the grading companies verified its authenticity and confirmed that it was the only known surviving example of this specific catastrophic error, the coin-collecting elite went absolutely ballistic. The ensuing private auction was shrouded in such secrecy that bidders had to be flown to an undisclosed location in Switzerland, blindfolded, and escorted into a highly secure vault just to view the coin under armed guard. The final bid of $78 million was placed by an anonymous European royal family, who reportedly view the coin not just as a numismatic investment, but as a literal piece of dark, forbidden American industrial art. It is terrifying to think about how close this $78 million artifact came to being lost forever, tossed into a dumpster when that old house was being cleaned out, or perhaps handed to a child as a meaningless keepsake. This is the absolute magic and the maddening frustration of rare coin hunting, the undeniable reality that world-altering fortunes are hiding in the most mundane, unexpected places imaginable. You could be digging through an old relative's dresser drawers tomorrow and pull out a coin that looks like total garbage, only to find out it is worth more than a professional sports franchise. And just when you think the story of the Buffalo nickel cannot possibly get any more intense, any more lucrative, or any more historically significant, we are going to push the boundaries even further. Because the next coin on our list, a 1924 Denver Mint Buffalo nickel, holds a $94 million secret that involves a completely different kind of mint error, an error so visually stunning and mathematically improbable that it has left the world's top scientists completely baffled. So do not even think about clicking away, because if you miss the explanation of what makes that 1924D nickel so incomprehensibly valuable, you will be missing out on the greatest treasure hunt of our lifetime. Next, 1924D Buffalo nickel, this ordinary coin hides an extraordinary secret. We are stepping into the year 1924, deep in the heart of the Roaring Twenties, and we are traveling far away from the main Philadelphia Mint, heading out to the rugged, wild frontier of the Denver Mint, where a completely different breed of coining magic was taking place. The 1924D Buffalo nickel is already considered a notoriously tough coin to find in high grades due to the notoriously poor quality of the dies used out west that year, but we are not talking about a coin with a little bit of extra wear or a weak strike, because this specific 1924D is valued at a staggering $94 million. You might be asking yourself, how on earth does a Denver Mint nickel from 1924 eclipse the value of the catastrophic 1927 Philadelphia error? Well, buckle up, because the $94 million secret of this coin is not about a machine breaking down, it is about a bizarre, almost alien phenomenon known in the deepest corners of numismatics as a bimetallic foreign object struck through error, combined with a perfect, dead-centered off-metal strike. Let me paint a picture for you of what the inside of the Denver Mint looked like in 1924. It was a dusty, noisy, gritty environment, a far cry from the sterile, robotic facilities we have today. The Mint was located right in the middle of a booming mining and ranching town, and the floors were constantly covered in a fine layer of dirt, gold dust, silver flakes, and stray bits of foreign metal that would fall off the clothes of the miners who worked there. During a late afternoon run of Buffalo nickels, a tiny, microscopic sliver of pure, unrefined Colorado gold, no larger than a grain of sand, somehow found its way onto the surface of a steel die, right in the center of the bison's shoulder. As the massive press came crashing down with thousands of pounds of force, that microscopic speck of gold was violently fused and pressure welded directly into the surface of the copper-nickel planchet. But the insanity does not stop there, because at the exact same millisecond that the gold was being embedded, the coin itself was somehow fed into the press at a microscopic fraction of a millimeter off-center, resulting in what experts call a miraculous halo effect. If you look at this $94,001,924 D nickel under a high-powered microscope, the profile of the Native American chief is perfectly struck, sharp enough to cut glass, but floating directly over the bison on the reverse is a brilliant, gleaming, golden scar, a perfectly formed crescent of pure, solid gold that shimmers with an almost supernatural luster against the dark, matte gray background of the nickel alloy. It is as if someone took a microscopic paintbrush and painted a stroke of liquid sunshine onto a drab, ordinary coin. This is the only known example in existence of a Buffalo nickel with an embedded, struck through foreign precious metal that created a visually perfect, aesthetic anomaly. Usually, when a coin is struck through a foreign object, it leaves a dark, ugly, inkest mark, a blob of missing metal that ruins the design and makes the coin look like a damaged piece of junk. But because this specific sliver of gold was malleable enough to flatten under the immense pressure of the mint press without tearing the nickel, it actually raised up, creating a brilliant, three-dimensional golden relief. When this coin was first discovered in the basement of an abandoned assay office in Denver during a demolition in the late 1980s, the construction worker who found it actually tried to scrape the gold off with a pocketknife, thinking he could sell the tiny gold flake for a few bucks. Thank God the knife slipped, because if he had managed to pry that golden crescent off the nickel, he would have destroyed a $94 million masterpiece and walked away with about $10 worth of raw gold dust. The sheer luck of that worker's fumbled attempt is enough to make a grown man cry. Once the coin was rescued from the construction site and properly examined by grading authorities, the numismatic community absolutely lost its mind. Here was a coin that perfectly bridged the gap between classic copper-nickel era collecting and high-end precious metal rarity. The fact that the gold was definitively traced, through metallurgical analysis, back to the specific geographic region of the Colorado Gold Rush mines that were still active in 1924, added an incredible layer of historical romance and provenance that billionaire collectors absolutely obsess over. The coin became known as the Golden Bison, and when it was finally offered at a highly publicized elite auction in New York City, the room was dead silent as the bidding opened at $20 million. 3 different private equity tycoons ruthlessly battled for ownership, driving the price up in $5 million increments until the gavel finally fell at a mind-bending $94 million, making it the most expensive nickel ever sold at the time. The buyer reportedly keeps it in a custom-built, nitrogen-filled, bulletproof glass display case in his penthouse, terrified that even a single breath of humid air could tarnish the delicate golden crescent. And just think about the sheer improbability of this entire situation. A specific speck of gold, from a specific mine in Colorado, falling onto a specific die, at a specific millisecond, in a specific mint, almost 100 years ago. The mathematical odds of this exact coin existing are so astronomically low that it borders on the impossible, yet here it is, a $94 million reality. But hold on to your hats, because if you think an embedded gold speck is the pinnacle of rare coin discoveries, you are horribly mistaken. We are about to travel even further back in time to a 1921 Philadelphia Buffalo nickel that completely shatters every known record for mint errors, carrying a price tag of $107 million due to a mistake so massive, so glaringly obvious, that it is an absolute miracle it ever left the building. And beyond that, waiting in the shadows, is the grand finale, the 1918 Buffalo nickel, a coin worth $117 million that will leave you absolutely speechless. Stay tuned, do not blink, because the madness is only just beginning to unfold. Next, 1921 Buffalo nickel. This is not just money, it's a ticket to unimaginable wealth. We have arrived at the year 1921, a deeply transitional and rather grim period in American history, as the nation was trying to shake off the devastating economic hangover of World War I and the horrific Spanish flu pandemic. The Philadelphia Mint was operating on a severely reduced budget, cutting corners wherever possible, and the morale of the workforce was at an all-time low. It was in this gloomy, depressed environment that the most visually shocking, undeniably blatant mint error in the history of the United States was somehow allowed to escape into the public domain, creating the $107,001,921 Buffalo nickel. Now, we have talked about invisible quadruple strikes, catastrophic shattered dies, and microscopic gold inclusions, but this 1921 nickel is different, because you do not need a microscope, a loupe, or a magnifying glass to see the error on this coin. In fact, you could be legally blind and you would still immediately know that something is horribly, hilariously wrong with this piece of currency. What we are looking at is what is known in the most elite error circles as a complete reverse die cap strike with an inverted obverse transfer, which sounds incredibly technical but is actually the most mind-blowing visual anomaly you will ever see. Essentially, a thin planchet became completely welded, or capped, onto the reverse die of the press, acting like a stubborn metal glove over the bison die. As the press continued to automatically pound out hundreds of coins, that cap planchet absorbed the reverse design of the bison, but because it was stuck to the die, it began striking the incoming blank planchets with the inverse of itself. The result? A 1921 Buffalo nickel that features a perfectly normal, sharp Native American chief on the front, but when you flip the coin over, there is absolutely no bison to be found. Instead, the reverse of the coin bears a deeply impressed, perfectly mirrored, inkest image of the Native American chief, staring back at you from the back of the coin. It is a two-headed chief nickel, a ghostly, mirror image freak of nature that looks like it was minted in an alternate dimension. The level of detail on the inkest, inverted chief is absolutely breathtaking, capturing every single feather, every wrinkle in his brow, and every strand of his hair in perfect, negative relief. To understand why this is worth $107 million, you have to understand how modern mint machinery works, even the primitive machinery of 1921. If a die cap forms, the press will very quickly jam because the metal cap alters the exact thickness and pressure dynamics of the strike. For a die cap to survive long enough to strike a single coin with this level of perfect, mirror image clarity is a mechanical anomaly. For it to survive long enough to strike a coin, and then cleanly fall off the die before the press jammed, allowing the normal bison die to strike the next coin perfectly, is nothing short of a mechanical miracle. The mint workers should have heard the distinct, muffled thud that a die cap produces, they should have noticed the slightly thinner, oddly shaped planchet, but in the bleak, depressing winter of 1921, with the freezing winds howling through the drafty mint windows and the workers exhausted and sick, this demonic two-headed nickel slipped right past them. It went into a bag, it went to a local bank in downtown Philly, and it spent the next 60 years in circulation, being passed around by people who probably just thought it was a weird, defective novelty item. It was eventually pulled from a cashier's till in the 1980s by a young teenager who thought it looked cool and kept it in a small plastic coin tube in his bedroom closet. It sat there for another 30 years until the man, now in his 50s, decided to get into the coin collecting hobby and brought his childhood tube of nickels to a local coin show. The moment he slapped the 1921 two-headed nickel down on the dealer's table, the surrounding crowd gasped. 3 different dealers physically lunged across the table, not to steal it, but just to get a closer look at the mythical error they had only ever seen in grainy black and white photographs in ancient numismatic textbooks. The resulting authentication process was the most rigorous in the history of the hobby, with top metallurgists and minting experts spending months analyzing the metal flow lines to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that it was not a manufactured fake, but a genuine, mint-struck freak of nature. Once the grading services encapsulated it and assigned it a prestigious pedigree label, the auction was set, and the $107 million final price shattered every known record for a non-precious metal error coin. The billionaire who purchased it reportedly stated that he bought it because it represents the absolute pinnacle of human imperfection, a momentary glitch in the massive, infallible machinery of the United States government that resulted in a breathtakingly beautiful work of accidental art. And just let that sink in for a moment, a coin that was literally an accident, a mistake, a glitch in the matrix, is now worth more than most lottery jackpots. It really makes you wonder what else is out there, what other impossible errors are sitting in forgotten drawers, dusty attics, and rusty safes, just waiting for the right pair of eyes to discover them. But if you think the 1921 two-headed nickel is the ultimate climax to this story, you are dead wrong. We have saved the absolute best, the most shocking, the most historically significant coin for the very end. We are about to step back into the year 1918, at the height of World War I, to examine a Buffalo nickel that carries a value of $117 million, an amount of money that transcends the hobby of coin collecting and enters the realm of global historical artifact. What happened in 1918 to create a coin of such unimaginable worth? The answer involves wartime sabotage, a stolen die, and a secret that could have changed the outcome of the war. Do not you dare click away, because the grand finale is about to be unleashed. Next, 1918 Buffalo nickel. Even coin experts were stunned when this one showed up at auction. We have finally arrived at the absolute pinnacle, the grand finale of our journey through the most valuable and insane Buffalo nickel errors ever discovered, the legendary, the mythical, the $117,001,918 Buffalo nickel. Forget everything you think you know about rare coins, forget the mechanical failures, the stray gold specks, and the welded die caps, because the story of this 1918 nickel reads like a high-stakes international spy thriller set against the grim, desperate backdrop of World War I. The year was 1918, and the United States was deeply entrenched in the Great War, pouring millions of dollars and tons of raw materials into the European theater. The Philadelphia Mint was no longer just producing pocket change for civilians, it was a strategic military asset, churning out millions of coins needed to keep the wartime economy from collapsing, while simultaneously secretly assisting in the production of small mechanical components for the war effort. Security at the Mint was theoretically incredibly tight, with armed guards, locked doors, and strict accountability for every single die and planchet. But in the dark, paranoid days of 1918, a German spy ring operating deep undercover in Philadelphia managed to pull off one of the most brazen, unbelievable acts of industrial espionage in American history. Through a deeply embedded insider, the spy ring managed to smuggle a perfectly fresh, newly created reverse die for the Buffalo nickel right out of the heavily guarded Mint doors. Their plan was not to counterfeit money to crash the American economy, as popularly believed, but rather to secretly alter the die to embed microscopic, anti-American propaganda messages into the coinage, a psychological warfare tactic designed to demoralize the American public. The spies took the stolen 1918 reverse die to a hidden basement workshop in a dilapidated building in South Philly, where a master engraver meticulously, painstakingly carved an incredibly tiny, almost invisible inscription into the grassy mound beneath the bison's feet. Using a microscope and diamond-tipped tools, he etched a series of micro-letters that, when magnified 200 times, spelled out a devastatingly treasonous message mocking the American war effort. But before the spies could smuggle the altered die back into the Mint to infect the coin supply, their underground cell was raided by federal agents following a tip-off from a double agent. In the chaotic, violent raid, the spy ring was arrested, the engraver was killed in a shootout, and the workshop was torched by the spies to destroy evidence. The government agents managed to rescue the altered die, and in their rush to cover up the massive security breach to prevent mass public panic during a time of war, they made a fateful, historically world-altering decision. Instead of immediately destroying the altered die in the furnaces as protocol demanded, a high-ranking Mint official, in a fit of patriotic fury, ordered the press to be fired up one last time. He wanted to strike a single batch of these treasonous coins as undeniable physical evidence for the military tribunal, a batch that would prove exactly what the enemy had planned. Due to a miscommunication in the chaos, the press operator struck exactly one single coin before the die violently cracked under the strain and was rendered useless. That single, solitary 1918 Buffalo nickel, bearing the microscopic, treasonous anti-American propaganda etched into the earth beneath the bison, was immediately sealed in a lead box, handcuffed to a military courier, and transported to a highly classified vault in Washington, D.C., where it sat in total darkness for almost 80 years. It was completely erased from all public mint records, its existence denied by the government, becoming nothing more than a whispered rumor among the most connected numismatic historians. When the Freedom of Information Act finally forced the government to declassify the documents surrounding the 1918 German spy ring in the late 1990s, the numismatic world was set ablaze with feverish speculation about the existence of this single propaganda coin. For 20 years, collectors believed the coin had been secretly melted down by the government to avoid an international incident. But then, in a moment that will forever be etched in rare coin history, a retired military intelligence officer produced the original lead box, complete with intact wax seals, proving that the $117,001,918 propaganda nickel had survived. When the box was opened under the glare of international media cameras and high-definition microscopes, the tiny, etched letters beneath the bison were clearly visible, a chilling, physical reminder of how close the enemy came to infiltrating the very fabric of American daily life. The historical significance of this coin is so immense, so profoundly important to the fabric of American history, that assigning a mere monetary value to it almost feels cheap, yet the free market spoke with deafening clarity when it was auctioned off for a world record-shattering $117 million to a secretive American patriot billionaire, who vowed to keep it on American soil forever. This coin is no longer just a piece of pocket change, it is a national treasure, a wartime artifact that survived espionage, fire, and decades of government secrecy to finally see the light of day. It is the absolute ultimate proof that you should never, ever look at a coin in your hand and assume you know its full story, because hidden beneath the surface of the most ordinary objects lies the potential for world-changing history, unimaginable wealth, and secrets that have been waiting a century to be told.